I normally love to say I told you so because it vindicates me and makes everybody else look stupid. And who doesn't love that? Well, normally I would love that, but in this case, I hate it because what I've been saying for the last 8 to 10 years, that our president has authoritarian tendencies, the consequences of that, if I'm right, would be so severe that I never want to be right on that. But yesterday, unfortunately, was a real turning point. Yesterday was the day when he really came out and said, well, a lot of us have always known he would eventually do. Yesterday, in a speech before the employees of the Department of Justice, he called for the imprisoning of his opponents, and he said critical media coverage of him is totally illegal. I mean, just think about that for a minute. He literally said media coverage that's critical of him is illegal. It's unbelievable that we have a president, not a candidate, but a president who is now saying these things. So in just a minute, I'm going to play a couple of clips. In the first one, he says he signed an executive order to stop censorship. Then literally 1 minute later, he calls for censorship. This is no different than what he did on January 6th. He doesn't come out and directly tell people what to do, but he lets them know what he thinks and what he hopes they'll do. And when you consider that the people in this room are functionally his employees and that their whole career is now dependent upon him and what he thinks of them, and that they've reached a higher level of achievement under him than they could have under any other president, the fact is that they want to do anything in their power to please him. And earlier in the speech, I listened to most of it. I'm not going to play this part of it, but earlier in the speech, he singled out somebody in the room, a man, I forget what his name was, but he gave him a huge compliment. He said, this guy has been great on television recently, hasn't he? The whole room burst into applause. Everybody's applauding this man, all of them wishing it was them that he had singled out for praise, but it wasn't. It was this man. But guess what they're going to do now? They are going to try to outdo that guy for his praise and attention. They're going to do they're going to do whatever they think he wants them to do without his ever having to say it. He just has to give a hint here and there about what he wants, and then they'll take it from there. They'll know what to do. They want to get his attention and they want to get his praise. All of these people, no, sorry, not all of these people, none of these people would be in these jobs under any other president. They would be completely unqualified for this job. Do you think Pam Bondi would be qualified to be attorney general under any other president? Do you think any other president would think she was remotely qualified? If anyone else had been president right now, she would not even imagine the possibility of being attorney general. It just wouldn't be possible. But under this president, all kinds of incompetence and corrupt people are now qualified for positions far, far higher than they could ever have achieved with a normal president. So let me play a couple of excerpts from what he said yesterday, and then we'll take a look at some traits that authoritarian leaders have in common and compare them to what we see in yesterday's talk. And let's see how he stacks up on the authoritarian scale, shall we? Here's the first clip.
And that's why on day one, I signed an executive order banning all government censorship and directing the removal of every bureaucrat who conspired to attack free speech and many other things and values in America.
So take note. In the first clip, he says he signed an executive order banning government censorship. Now, in just a minute, you're going to hear him essentially call for government censorship. But first, this.
And I believe that CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal.
Now, this is chilling when you think about it. Think who he's talking to here. He's talking to employees of the Department of Justice who are in charge of enforcing the laws of the United States. They have the full power and resources of the United States to back any case they want to bring against anyone. So all they have to do is come up with some tricky little way to charge reporters or journalists or people who manage and own their companies that they work for, the media companies, with some kind of crime. And being that their top goal in life is to win the praise of the president, you can bet they will be working overtime to figure out how they can do just that. Because whoever comes up with the way to intimidate reporters and journalists and even regular citizens into silence is going to win the praise of the president. And that's what they live for. If you're a hardcore supporter of this president right now, and you're listening to this and thinking, well, that doesn't explain why you think he's going to turn out to be a dictator, Jonathan, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But first, listen to this.
It makes no difference how big a victory I had. I can have the biggest victory in history. It makes no difference what kind of a failure the other side has. These people are going to go after me.
Yes, you are right, Mr. President. It literally makes absolutely no difference how big a victory you had. The media and the people of the United States are guaranteed the absolute right to criticize you at any time. It has nothing to do with the size of your victory. Here, let me read you what the First Amendment actually says regarding free speech. It says Congress will make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Okay, that's the religion part. Here's the next part is the free speech part. Or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Now, perhaps you're a little confused on what the word abridging might mean. Well, in the context of the First Amendment, it means to restrict or curtail the freedoms of speech and the press. This is bedrock Americana. It's literally the biggest thing that has made America great. The ability of anyone to criticize any political leader for any reason at any time without restriction is the biggest thing that has made America great. Because without this ability and without this freedom, that's how you end up with dictators. Have you ever noticed that every authoritarian regime starts off by restricting the media and punishing the media when they're critical? Now, I know it's hard for the politicians who get criticized. They hate this. They always wish the First Amendment would go away. But look at the countries that have produced the best leaders, and look at the countries who have produced the worst leaders. And in almost every case, the worst leaders come from countries where there is little to no freedom of the press and no freedom of speech. And the best countries, Western Europe, the United States, Japan, South Korea, Australia, all these countries always are the ones where there's a lot of freedom of speech. And the reason this works so well overall is because it's how countries get rid of bad leaders. Without freedom of speech, you can never get rid of a bad leader. And that's why bad leaders are those who are most intent on squelching our freedom of speech. So, Mr. President, the more you show your intention to suppress our freedom of speech, that's just like a neon sign shouting, I'm a bad leader, because freedom of speech always hurts bad leaders, but always helps good leaders. All right, let's listen to this next clip.
These networks and these newspapers are really no different than a highly paid political operative. And it has to stop. It has to be illegal. It's influencing judges, and it's really changing law, and it just cannot be legal. I don't believe it's legal.
Oh, it is legal, Mr. President. It's right there in the First Amendment to the Constitution. It's completely legal. But did you hear what he said to this room full of law enforcers? He actually gave them an idea, a path they may want to pursue in order to twist the law and make it illegal. He suggested that media organizations aren't really the press, but rather they are an arm of the Democratic Party. So it's not hard to imagine an employee of this Justice Department going after, say, MSNBC and saying, you're an arm of the Democratic Party. You're not a media organization. So you have no freedom of speech at all. Your speech is regulated under all the campaign laws. And campaign law says a TV network can't be run and controlled by a political party. And yet you are run and controlled by the Democratic Party. Now, of course, they aren't run and controlled by the Democratic Party, but that's not going to stop a group of Trump Justice Department employees from possibly asserting that they are. And whether they use that argument or not, nothing's going to stop them from just making up some new law or some new principle in law out of whole cloth and applying it to these media organizations. Now, for those of you who are still unconvinced and don't see how this could possibly ever lead to a dictatorship, I want to quickly look at three traits. And authoritarian trait number one is self-indulgence and a love for long, long speeches. And did I mention this speech at the Department of Justice was long? It went on for more than an hour. And that's fresh on the heels of a State of the Union speech, which went on for more than an hour and a half. Did you know that dictators frequently use long-winded speeches to reinforce their personal narrative and to decry all the injustices they feel they've suffered? And if you listen to this whole speech, you'll see the whole thing was about injustices that he feels he suffered at the hands of people in government and the media. Okay? Authoritarian trait number two, crackdowns on a free press. A free press is a threat to authoritarian control because it holds leaders accountable and exposes corruption or incompetence. Dictators work to silence criticism by censoring media or branding independent media outlets as, have you ever heard this? Enemies of the people. Anything sounding familiar to you there? Trump has consistently attacked media outlets that criticize him, labeling them as fake news and enemies of the people. And in this rambling talk he gave to the DOJ yesterday, he intensified those attacks by suggesting that negative press coverage should be deemed illegal and investigated. This is especially chilling now because he's no longer just a candidate saying these things. He's no longer the crazy candidate. He's the actual president of the United States with all the powers that come with that position. And last but not least, authority. Authoritarian trait number three, weaponizing the legal system against political enemies. And that's exactly what he did in the speech yesterday. Using legal mechanisms to punish opponents gives dictators a veneer of legitimacy while eliminating threats. This can take the form of politically motivated investigations, trumped-up charges, or judicial overreach. By bending and twisting the law to their will, they intimidate rivals, discourage dissent, and create a chilling effect on opposition movements. Courts often become rubber stamps, serving the dictator's agenda rather than upholding justice. So that's the rule. Has Trump done any of these things? If you listen to this whole speech, you'll see that he expressed his intention to see the Justice Department used to investigate and prosecute his political opponents. He threatened legal action against journalists and judges and prosecutors and officials from the previous administration, calling for their imprisonment without even specifying any crimes. These actions align with behaviors often observed in authoritarian regimes where leaders seek to consolidate power by controlling information and using the legal system to suppress their opposition. It's time we stop playing around and acting like this isn't what this president is all about. To give a speech to those charged with enforcing our laws and to encourage them to find ways to prosecute people who've committed no crimes for exercising their absolute right to free speech should sound absolute alarm bells in everyone in America. And if it doesn't, well, maybe we could use an old idea that Republicans have come up with to test people for their civic knowledge before allowing them to vote. And if these behaviors don't resonate with you as being those of a dictatorial leader, then perhaps you shouldn't be allowed to vote. And that's my opinion. If you enjoyed what I had to say, then like, and if you'd like to hear more, subscribe. Take care, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.